We're here with Evan Burke. Evan is based out of Ottawa, works out of Intention Physical Training. Been a kinesiologist for a while, it looks like, and has been helping us out with the members classes and our online group classes, and is currently running classes at 10 a.m. PST on Wednesdays for our 5 for 5 membership. And we're going to get to know Evan a little bit more today. We can see on the background of Evan's wall that he's an amazing artist. Either that or he has a couple kids. How old are your kids? You said they're both under 4.
One's like probably going to be 2 in a couple months, and 3.5. So, yeah.
Just like the ideal age for like easy to handle, right?
Yeah, they're probably the most difficult of ages. Yeah, no, we're definitely talking to we have a few different parents with kind of similar ages in the neighborhood here, and this is probably one of the toughest ages. But it's fun. Like they're a lot of fun, but it's just a lot of work. But you know, it's nice to kind of have the MovMed drills and kind of techniques and little things that I use during my day, especially with my kids, just to stay calm, basically, which is really nice to have. Actually, it's been a big go-to for me.
What are your go-tos? What are the things that you find yourself like, okay, when I'm like haywired?
Like mewing first and foremost. So like suction, and doing most things with faces as well. My daughter actually loves she's kind of off on a temper tantrum or whatever. I'll throw down some chipmunk cheeks or some fish lips, and every time she like catches a high sight of it, she'll do it too, and kind of calms her down, which is kind of nice as well. So yeah, and then just kind of suction work and lying on the balls and breathing under pressure, probably, especially like after a long day or whatever. It's a big go-to. Grab the balls or just grab something heavy.
Watch your changes since I think we first had sessions after your boy Jeff introduced us.
That's right. Yeah.
And I remember the just the far-reaching effort. It was my my bad in the communication of it, but you stuck around to get with it, and I appreciate you doing so. But I've seen a ton of your changes and physical transformation, but just the calm, the patience, the same stuff that I like pride myself in working on and being able to develop. It seems like you're developing a ton of like good coordination that applies to being a parent and being able to make space for yourself as a person, not just a parent.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. What was that, like probably 3 years ago now? Maybe 2.5, 3 years ago.
Wow.
That I think I first did a session with you. But it's wild to think kind of the progressions that you make even in personal training, because like I've only been doing it for 10 years, which seems like a long time, but the amount of different things I've been into, and I would have to say that probably the most progression I've had as a trainer has happened in the past like 3 years, and a lot of it is due to these kinds of techniques, which I found obviously very helpful with my own clients. Like they all receive the benefit of the majority of drills that I do, are especially for probably at least a quarter of the session is mostly MovMed based.
Right. Well, if I could, what is your how long have you been a trainer for?
10 years.
10 years. Yeah.
10 years, and I've been on my own for 5 years. So yeah.
What has your focus been as far as that 10 to 5 years when you, like, I suppose, clarified what it is you were instituting in practice? Because it seems like I've seen a bunch of your page prior to us having this conversation, but just the variety that you've explored, I'm curious what you identify with in having made sculpted your practice up to this point.
Probably it's probably been mostly about, when I started, it was like at a gym that did a lot of circuit training. It was very looking back, it was very sympathetic workout for the most part. 45 minutes of just like basically CrossFit circuit based movements and drills and whatnot. And within that, I did some personal training, and then I started to do more personal training over doing classes, etc. And once I got into the personal training side of things, it kind of like I did phys ed kinesiology as a university degree here in at Brock University. But anyways, basically from that, in personal training, got into more just basically helping people. It was just mostly, as soon as someone would come in, instead of doing, some kind of squat based, CrossFit based movement, it would be more about like, what's going on? Like, what's your injury? Like, what's your problem? What's your pain, etc. And then through that, I did, FRC, like FRC based systems. I did that for probably about 2 years. I learned a lot from that, but there was a lot of holes in what they're doing, in terms of, broadening their scope of practice for people. But for the most part, it's just been, just helping people just be more resilient and kind of probably be less geared towards, the mainstream fitness and more geared towards like just trying to make them feel better in terms of their health and well-being.
One question on that FRC point. They talk on irradiation, right? There's a focus on
Yes.
irradiation. My curiosity is, you remember our discussions about kind of the heat discrepancy, like radiating your heat versus irradiating your heat. Have you I mean, they're obviously different concepts, but have you, when you've explored, say, in your shoulder joints or your elbows, creating that visceral heat, have you seen a difference or some carryover with that?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, to be honest, when I was doing FRC, I don't think I really, felt irradiation well. I wasn't, I don't think I was irradiating in terms of how I would see irradiation now. It's more about just literally creating heat or pressure. And I feel like at that time when I was doing FRC, I wasn't able to do that in a way that I would know now.
How would they describe their process? As I understand it, it's more joint isolative, like they focus on discrepancies.
Joint by joint. Yeah, the joint by joint approach, and a very like the pails and rails, which would regard like basically an isometric on both sides of the joint. There'd be a lot of focus on doing cars, which is simply like, joint circles at each joint of your body. And with that being said, there was a lot of learning in the course itself, like in terms of anatomy and some physiology, but I don't think they actually tapped into what you're doing in terms of like the neurology of things and actually feeling like interocepting your joints, if that's how you want to just like describe the system per se, because a lot of it has to do with, like as you would say, or like stop chasing pain. It would be more of like a whole body approach where like everything needs to be online for you to feel that part of your body. And I found FRC to be very broken up. Like, this is your elbow, this is what your elbow does, this is your wrist, and this is what your wrist does. But nothing kind of like brought everything together, really, in my opinion.
Is there value, and I'm going to ask you guys both this question, I guess, is there value in isolative training? So if you were to compartmentalize certain muscle groups, say you had issues rotating your shoulders, or you had issues with spinal motion, or say some general issue with motion, and you're prescribed some type of isolative behavior, have you found that learning that muscle group in its own has been beneficial to you? Has it taken you to a new step of like, oh, maybe I could do more with the body if I were to grasp this? I'm not asking for this time's perspective, but at the time when you're messing around.
I would say for myself, I didn't really jump super deep into like, okay, we're gonna really like own your wrist rotations, and we're going to do 50 of these, and they all got to be like all to the extreme spectrum of how far they could go. I kind of more jumped into the let's integrate everything. And in doing so, I think I was maybe missing actually some of the more controlled articulations of certain joints and getting more motion out of, where I could move easier. So there was a world where maybe I got too integrated and could have used a little more isolation to understand particular areas. But like, I don't know, at this point, somebody I was working with this week, she had some neck and shoulder stuff going on. She's like, yeah, I work my neck. I do the cars. She'd done the FRC like neck cars, which I think are just like, circles of the neck. And I was like, yeah, that I think there can be benefits to like moving in that way if you really don't understand your range of motion there. But what I had her do was just, stand in a room, and I want you to start looking around, and I want you to just kind of like, observe things in the room, observe things around you in a way that forces your neck to move, and not just your neck. Like I want your whole body to move as a system, but I want you to like stretch essentially your visual range, stretch your ability to perceive part of your environment. And that's where I think like the FRC stuff can be a little limiting. It's like, okay, in a vacuum, yeah, this is how I can do it. But how does this relate to when I have like an off-centered weight in my hand, or when I'm about to do something at speed? I don't think it really relates a whole ton there, but I could see where it's like, not a terrible starting point if somebody just comes out off of surgery to just like, okay, let's explore your tibial rotations a little bit just to get you a little more connected into it.
I have an interesting question then, and I think you guys can both elucidate further on it. You had said specifically integration, something that allowed for you to better integrate the motion, hypothetically an isometric that allowed for you to better coherently understand some type of structure or motion, hinge, squat, whatever. Have you experienced in the last little while, or at any point in your training, an ability to integrate the joint efficacy of, say, isolating joint and behavior like a car or pails and rails, or at the same time also being able to integrate, as you, Ben, are accustomed to trying a plethora of different integrative movement patterns and behaviors that when you put them together, have you found a means to put those two efforts together, or is there not a means to put that together?
For me personally, especially with my clients who have been with me for a while, probably through the time that I was doing FRC and afterwards, etc. For the most part, what it was missing was more of the feel portion of things. I mean, each client is going to be independent to their own issues, but I think the big thing that comes from the background of FRC is the understanding of the different regions of the body. And I think putting that together is more about just having the client understand what they're feeling and how to deal with those kinds of feelings. So basically, with the background, I think it's good, but for the most part, what it's missing is just the key of like interocepting, or simply being able to communicate with their midline or their central nervous system as they're performing something, whatever that integrative technique is.
Yeah.
Okay, so the midline would be the integrative, and when
Exactly,
we say midline,
yeah,
it's a bunch of things, but what would you say is the biggest qualifier of midline behavior that gets people, or midline reflex that gets people feeling succinct or integrated, coordinated?
I think the biggest one is just having them slow down. For basic portion of the beginning of my sessions is mostly either done in like a standing still position, or on their back on the floor. And I think that having someone slow down and actually feel what's happening in the body. They might be bloated. They might be having some neck issues. They could have a shoulder issue. They have a foot. It doesn't matter whatever part of the body is, but for the most part, if they can just like learn how to slow down and focus on literally the middle of their body, in terms of like, getting pressure into certain areas that they're not normally getting pressure into, or feeling an area that they are not all too aware of or aware of at all, is going to help them, one, take their mind off of whatever their issue is. And, from there, it's much easier to deal with that client because they have a better grasp of their own feelings, or like being able to communicate better through the rest of the session when we're actually, dealing with things that involve movement or, more complex patterns, whatever that may be.
Yeah, and the whole idea of like slowing down relates not just to like your mind state, but it's also at a particular joint. You might have part of your joint that moves way faster than anything else. It like reaches around or past the midline in a way where you're now dispersing pressure, you're creating strain and just a lack of integration, so to speak. I was working with somebody who she had some like wrist and thumb issues, and we were doing just like a basic grip exercise. Her thumb would just like every time move very like quicker than everything else, and more. It would just move more than everything else. And in trying to get her to not do that, it didn't really matter. As like she would just keep doing the same thing. So I had to first make her understand that she was actually kind of like dislocating her thumb every time that she went to grab anything, and she couldn't create really the stretch on the webbing. And I had to like take her hand and be like, you feel this stretch, this kind of like this direction that your thumb can't move in. I'm like, okay, so feel for that, and gave her like a bit of a positional switch in order for her to create that stretch. And it was, very taxing on her system, essentially connecting a part of her body or a part of her mind that was moving too fast into the task and bringing it back to the body, telling it to slow down and then integrate it, right? And now, like, how can you still move your thumb? You don't need to completely like take your thumb out of the picture, although sometimes it can feel like that's what's needed. Now can you perform the task with more of your body in a way that you'll have to slow down, you'll have to like, it'll take more conscious effort for you to coordinate it. But that's like that example at the hand can relate pretty much anywhere, and that's the kind of like integration that that if you don't have the feeling sensation or the understanding of where you are super quick to move, then you probably won't be able to like do whatever joint circles and put that all together.
Sounds like what you're describing, Ben, is a deference to sympathetics, such that if you've built something out, if that's the thing that moves you quicker, then the pacing that prescribes to you and the lines of tension that are molded as a byproduct are perhaps a little quicker to move. And I think this is probably something that many people get mixed communication on. Like sympathetics and stress, it's not just the opposite of rest and digest. You're not just, oh, I can't sleep and I can't eat my food, I'm not hungry. Although that is a hugely related like vagal thing, and you want to be hungry, or at least have the appetite that a normal person should have when exhausted of their food supply or energy supply. There are a number of things that we should normally have a wanting for, or a quote unquote hunger for. But at the same time, the notion that rest and digest is the only like qualifier of parasympathetics is to allow people to understand things much more simply than they are. And if we really think about what play is and what fun is and what like all the pictures that you see behind you that Evan, that are qualifiers of explorative shapes and colors and things that help a brain develop fundamentally from the onset, those things are to your children and to the kids that are drawing around them, or if it's just them at home, whatever, there's a fundamental, like, I'm learning what to do. There's dopamine applied to this. There's fun here. I'm parasympathetic in that I'm allowant for all these things outside of threat to be new to me, and I can maybe learn something from these very perhaps confusing or exciting or whatever it may be. And some people get too fixated on the creativity or too fixated on the task, when at the end of the day, what we're really allowing for is the nervous system to try new things, be excited about them, and in the effort of being excited about them, make new connections that look like new ideas, but they're only ideas once we register what they mean to us. At the onset, they're just new patterns. And new patterns, just like new brain connections, need allowances. They need this space to be unthreatened and be molded. So I don't know where this excitable tangent came from, or where it's going, rather.
It was the pictures. It was the pictures.
Okay, it was the pictures, yeah. I think at the end of the day, most people in parasympathetics and sympathetics, the discussion of what is stress and what is not stress, come to terms with the fact that if outside of stress, you only want to rest, if you only want to eat, you're probably so stressed that you don't have a dopamine profile for, oh, what could I do outside of stress? Which is to say, perhaps just like a kid, you need to figure out what a hobby is and figure out how to mold some identity around, hey, I'm excited about doing these things. I'm not excited about doing these things. And over a course of however long, without fervently determining whether or not you like it or because you're good at it or not, treat yourself like a kid, get good at something over time, and figure out how to be a person in parasympathetics. Basically, just as I'm sure, Evan, you can describe this in a ton of different stories, but the process of learning new things sometimes creates some excitability and some newness that feels like raw emotion. And it's kind of hard to disassociate between, hey, I've had a good time, and maybe I've committed too much of myself to this good time. So
I find it hilarious because it's I have like two lives. I have like my job is like trying to make people have fun, and then my home life is basically like settling. Like let's tone it, like let's take it back like just a little bit. Like if you actually like have a chance, or if you have any kids and you go to like a daycare or something, like my kids go to a pretty big daycare. They have 10-15 kids a class and whatever. And just if you just like stand there for like 10-15 minutes and watch kids like play in the playground or inside and whatever, they all have their own little like things, but they're stoked. They're like you give them a shovel in the snow, they're stoked. If it's raining outside, they're stoked. Like if you go inside, like there's painting going on, they're like all of them jazzed up. Like, if you would give, any one of my adult clients just a little bit of that, like 10 minutes of that a day, they would feel so much better. But it's just there's a lot of people who don't, interact with that age group or interact with that kind of childlike behavior that I think that a lot of people actually need, at least for like 10-20 minutes of their day, which would be awesome. But that's just not the case. But
Do you feel like you get a lot of that just having kids around as a whole, or are you like, in a way, you're kind of played out?
Oh, for sure. No, I get, I work, I work for I work from like 5:30 till like 3 or 4 in the afternoon every day, and then I have my kids in the evening time basically. So it's like there's pros and cons to like how much fun they're having, but at the end of the day, like it's exhausting. But there's just so much joy in two kids. Well, actually, not joy. That's a bad word. Because there's so many emotions, but like there's just so much life in kids that you don't see. I don't see for the other parts of my day. Like you get two kids that are like under 4 years old. They're just like they have the energy of like 30 adults, like two kids, and like it's just crazy. But it's interesting to see the divide of energy that happens, from childhood to teenage years to, your 20s, 30s. And then, once we start getting older and older, people tend to have less fun, but they would have more opportunity if they would just spend maybe a little bit of their day every day trying to get that back in their lives. But anyways.
As a thank you to our podcast listeners, we're extending our 25% off winter sale until January 2nd with the code MBWinter25. Pick up our Recovery Trainer web course, our Mewing course, or our new 5 for 5 membership. Happy holidays from MovMed.
You had said a distinction between joy and life, and I wonder if your distinction is similar to mine, despite our difference in me not having kids. Would you say that by saying it's full of life, your experience in having kids is a testament to the fact that as a person, you are made to experience all the ups and downs of what it is to be a person: fear, anger, joy, excitement, whatever comes with being a parent, whatever comes with being an adult that just had their first, second child, who's managing the efforts of being whatever in that dynamic. Do you find that life means, in some ways, some people might say, conquering, or no, not conquering, but coming to terms with your shadow, coming to terms with the way life is not as sweet as we all hope it would be all the time?
I mean, it's interesting because all of the emotions you just pointed out like happen within like 1 minute of time with like one kid. But yeah, no, for sure. I was in the same situation that Nate was in a way when I was younger. My mom passed away when I was like 3. And I was just with my dad for up until I was like 8 or 9. Then I have a stepmom as well. They just live around the corner. But it's very bittersweet to have kids that age when you didn't have that growing up. And it's very interesting to see the dynamic of, how your kids see, mom and dad in terms of like what they're looking for from you in a way. And obviously it's a little bit different here and there with certain parents, et cetera. But, for the most part, like it's just, what I say, it's so joyful, but at the same time, you see how so many people could be, how their nervous system could be so affected by their childhood and their upbringing. And I feel like that is something that a lot of people hold on to, especially into their pain cycles or, how they interact with others, et cetera. But, for the most part, when it comes to having kids, like I feel like I saw a stat the other day too. It was like millennial dads are like crazy percentage spending more time with their kids, changing diapers, that kind of thing. And it's just interesting to have had my dad growing up, who was always there, even though he worked full time. And he was kind of like the mom. He would go to he told me that he would go to like mom groups, and he'd be like the only dad there. This is back in the 90s, whatever. And now, like, you'd see like a mom group and there'd be like 4 or 5 dads there, easy peasy. But anyways, going back into just simply having a good upbringing. And that's really, when you look at a child, and their environment, the best environments are ones that are just like safe, like a safe environment for them to just explore, and just be safe, really. And I feel like those environments are missed in a lot of cases, unfortunately.
Well, it's also having parents that are regulated or have their own regulatory nervous system like there for the child to mirror or to kind of latch onto if the child again, I don't have kids either, but from what I can understand about development, if the child is in that situation where say that whatever parent is freaking out is like kind of disassociating from the needs of the child because they just can't regulate their own what's going on internally, then the child's one going to feel some sense of like abandonment in that moment, but also like kind of copy the same or kind of have the same reaction and potentially carry that through. Is that something that you're kind of conscious of like, you know, you are kind of a mirror for your kids and
Yeah,
how
for
you
sure.
that,
Yeah,
that often
most
plays.
definitely. Um, you know, especially when like, you know, when you have a baby from like 0 to 1 years old, it's a little bit different. But when they start becoming like little humans, and you can kind of see it, and like they'll test you, and they're just little yous, right? And I remember being a kid, and I was not the most uh, I wasn't the best kid, but you know, I can see that in my own kids when I'm watching them. But at the same time, like you want to make sure that you're always there, and that you have as much patience as you possibly can. And it's just important that you know, you keep the environment safe. That's kind of that's the biggest thing for, I think, me and my wife, is as long as the environment is safe, then, you know, they're probably going to be going through all the emotions, but at the end of the day, that's what they'll uh, that's what they'll um, that's what their body and their mind will kind of latch onto, is just that safety. And you can see it when you're looking at, you know, different kids at the park or at daycare, etc. And you know, my mother-in-law is a guidance counselor, and she deals with a lot of like, you know, different homes and that kind of stuff. And it's just interesting to see, you know, how certain kids are, um, how they are in comparison to others, in relation to their environment. And I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, their guardians who are around them, and then exactly what we started the conversation with is just mirroring. So having, you know, good people to mirror off of.
I think that oftentimes adults don't make tangible their needs or their wants for the future until the future is there in front of them. And in the case of many unhappy households, it comes at the time of an unexpected pregnancy or child, or in the case of, um, I guess, for us, Evan, perspective, growing up a little bit different than other kids, having a mom out of our life earlier on. Uh, for me, it always made me look and see the different like relationship other kids had with their mom or their parents, and despite not having an ideal relationship with my dad, I still love him, and I still want for there to be some kind of improvement within the family. And I think from a young age, I've always sought for resolving things that haven't taken place. And I wonder if you experience similarly, that from your context, you want for there to be things managed prior to them taking place, or prior to there being an issue, or you see them unfolding in people who may not have similar experience and may not know how to contextualize what it means to have uh, the panic that they're experiencing in that moment, thought about and felt over the course of many years.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is I grew up with, I think you had 2 or 3 brothers.
Um, I have 6 siblings.
You have 6 siblings. Damn. See, I had just one brother, growing up, and I just lived in a, you know, a house full of guys, obviously. And I feel like, with that being said, a lot of what I see from my wife in terms of what she is for the kids, et cetera, and also having a daughter, so like 2 women in the house, you just there was definitely something lacking in my childhood, And I always knew that from the time my mom probably passed away, where it's like when you would go to friends' houses or you'd see, other kids interact with their mom, etc. It was just a different vibe. And my dad was a great dad, but he wasn't a mom in a way. Obviously, he wasn't a mom. Well, he was a mom and a dad, but he wasn't a woman. Anyways, what I'm trying to get at is basically,
This was the 90s and it meant something different.
yeah, exactly. And obviously seeing now what my wife is to my kids, and how important a mother's relationship is with their kids. I definitely feel like I probably would have grown up completely differently, and who knows if I would have been a different person. But at the same time, um, you really start to see that there are some biological distinctions um, for a really good reason, especially for males. I feel like as a kid growing up, you need those role models in your life, and they're just so important, especially because just learning empathy and compassion, and being more level-headed. Like, I didn't have any of that when I was a kid, and I feel like a lot of that was due to not having some form of, I had grandmas, but like I didn't live with my grandmas. But I feel like that's really important for males growing up, is to have that kind of, at least some form of um, mom or like women role model in your life, because that I just feel like that's really super important for younger males.
Yeah, I had my mom passed when I was 11, so I experienced my childhood up until before puberty. I don't have a recollection of time between maybe 12 and 15, little spats and whatever, but I do remember a number of years prior to my mom passing. And I can say that I think just because I was her first kid and because she spent so much time with me, I was kind of raised into a lot of nurturing and attention that my siblings perhaps didn't get the same time for, like flashcards, and I was her first kid. But in the same, I was also like highly sensitive as a kid, and she experienced there being like I don't know, I mean, perhaps because she herself was very sensitive and I was ADHD or a number of different diagnoses, she invested a lot of energy into me. And I think in the same way that over the course of many different things, being heavy investments to a nervous system, she got sick from overtaxing herself. And I think something to be said about being an adult with a lot of nervous responsibility, whether it's you have to be a mirror for a lot of people, or you have to learn what it is, what mirror you're looking back in. I can't speak for her because this is just my own presumption that stress was the thing, but what stressors those were, I can't say. At the end of the day, if we don't take care of what it means to tuck ourselves in at night, the same way that we would want to tuck our kids in, or you tuck your kids in, wanting to invest some notion of, even if we don't have it, we still deserve it, or there's still some nourishing and like love that we can satiate, like not patting ourselves in the back, but I think there is for everyone, and I think this is something we all come to terms with when we've lost something, or if we've contextualized what it means to lose something in the face of other people not losing something. And it can go the way of resentment, which for me it did for a while, and not really understanding where it was that I like fit in, or how it was that I was supposed to like be relaxed when any environment asked me to. we get to appreciate that fundamentally, if we don't take part in enriching our own inner child, and not even saying like it's a little kid that needs awareness. It's like a limbic process, a baby that never learned words. So we taught it a couple of words. We said, go on, do this job. And before it really learned the other words that meant these other feelings, it had these experiences that elicit those feelings. And from those feelings, it retroactively tried to learn those words. What I'm trying to say is there's some things that a brain needs to contextualize in a safe environment that it can do at any age. But if it's created too much identity over and around feeling that it's too complex and too aggrandized, the person becomes the feeling, the person becomes what effectively is a victim in the face of a bunch of people not understanding their circumstance, which I grew up very much that person. And it was in large part like I was empathetic, but I didn't know how to ask for the same empathy in turn without feeling one, excuse my vernacular, a pussy, and two, like I'm being pitied by everyone that looks me in the eye or tries to for a second. So I kind of like pushed and resented even the effort to take that initiative. And I guess aside the tangent I'm going on, my point being that unless a person understands what it means to be viscerally invigorated without words to describe their experience, I think that person's probably going to hit a wall just like they would in a car, experience whiplash neurologically, and just be woozy and really hard to associate with for a period of time. And that period of time is memories lost and connections lost, and that personhood that you could have otherwise connected with is going to be personhood lost. And we don't want to look back on time and be like, shit, what could I have done? Who could I have been? And it's not the way to be, for sure. But what we can do in the moment is we can contextualize. Maybe if I have a bad experience, I'm going to do my best to not be a cherry on top of the shit pie. I'm going to do my best to maybe clean up some of it or breathe it in and fucking take stake of my circumstances. Maybe I made some of this mess. Maybe I was a part of this. Maybe I could have prevented this. And all the things that we can contextualize in a realistic fashion without hyperbole is making exaggerated an exaggeration of our feelings. I think it teaches us, just like your kids, not to scream when someone takes their favorite toy, not to get upset when playtime's over and they have to go home and they didn't know that the clock was already, or you didn't have their favorite snack because they ate 2 of them yesterday. Like the same thing's happening for people who just don't expect the bad thing to happen. So if we don't attach ourselves to the good thing, and we better attach ourselves to who we can be regardless of that. Present, midline, stable. I think we can go a long way.
There's a lot to digest with that, but I think that one one thing that stuck out with me was just the simple fact that with the fact that you grow up without having a mom, or like you lose your mom halfway, whatever that is, you have to become kind of your own nurturing kind of mother or father or both, basically. And I think that's an important lesson that people, or myself, I need to learn, is to just kind of touch base with yourself. And in terms of the drills that come from MovMed, a lot of that has to do with connecting with parts of your body, or connecting with parts of yourself that otherwise we're not really well connected to the system as a whole. And when it comes to learning how to just be more calm and be more relaxed, and deal with situations instead of being angry, or having as my kids do a lot, is temper tantrums with yourself, is those kinds of tools really help, because those emotions are fine to have, but understanding that you have to have the ability within yourself to control those emotions, and a lot of that has to do with your limbic system and your nervous system, how you interact with your midline, and that's been of great benefit, not only in the past couple of years in terms of my past, but also with my kids. So yeah.
Evan, as a dad, do you find that there's almost in the way that you approach clients, that there's a type of client who almost needs more of that, like a sternness to the approach that you have, versus somebody who maybe needs like a little more nurturing? Like there, you obviously, a coach is weird that it can kind of turn into almost a parent relationship, because you are instructing them to do things for their own good, essentially. And it's interesting that you can, obviously shapeshift a little bit depending on the person in the day. Do you kind of notice some carryover between the way that you have to kind of be stern with your kids versus stern with some clients versus more like nurturing with others?
100%. Like it's interesting, because if you look at all of your clients in a whole, you interact with each one a little bit differently, mostly due to you're interacting with them and not the other person. But yeah, I mean, there's some clients who need more of like kind of like, what are you doing? And then some clients who need to like chill out, like calm down, like like you're being ridiculous. Also, some clients need to laugh more. Some clients are very emotional. It's interesting, but a lot of the tools I would say you would garner from being a parent, I probably say have been quite helpful in my workplace, really.
I imagine that you had some of that already baked in, like even before you became an actual parent. But yeah, just the act of having to really nurture a child or a baby to where they are now, and as that continues, like those skills will continue to develop for you. Has there been like much of a struggle in like in the playing the role of the dad? Like, is that something that comes kind of natural to you because you were mostly around men growing up, or did you maybe not understand kind of the dichotomy or like the yin yang between the dad and the mom?
Yeah, so basically that's actually a good point. I feel like I had more, I feel like I'm just like ready to be a dad in terms of my own dad, having my dad, I'm on his own basically. And I had too much dad going on. There's way too much dad. I needed more mom. So that's kind of that was like the learning process, especially from the get-go, is like understanding, um, as a as a dad, I have like different expectations in terms of not my kids, but like in terms of um, the mom dad dichotomy. And anyways, basically, I just needed to learn to be more like patient, empathetic, compassionate, softer. And those were kinds of things that I just needed to learn. I didn't really have. And I feel like those things as well are important in, training, important in being a coach for whoever it may be, because, there's a lot of people out there who probably aren't set up nervous system midline wise for like the dad, like the strict dad approach. You have to kind of mix in a lot of like a softer approach, especially with people who are already kind of like really, amped up, or who have a lot of stress in their lives, etc.
Do you think it's a fair correlative to compare the behaviors that you've had to come to terms with, maybe through deep pressure therapy, maybe through mewing course, maybe through whatever, a means to better connect or better consciously regulate dad yourself? Have you seen a comparative to that relationship with yourself translating to your training, like how you can
For sure. I mean, for the one thing I was like thinking about the other day too, when I was doing like a mewing drill with one of my clients, I was like, this is awesome. Like it's in comparison to what I was doing like 3 or 4 years ago. It's like you're literally having someone stand up and like just be like, I can't remember what I was doing. It was just silent screaming, and I was having this person hold their tongue on their palate while they were silent screaming. It was from the one where you're pretending like you're holding on to a really heavy object, whatever it was, and they were just standing in the gym, with just struggling keeping their tongue on their palate. And I was like, this is like it was a lot of fun for me as a coach, but in my you know from what I got from the client and afterwards as well was a sense of like they just looked a little bit like looser, a little bit more a little bit more awake, a little bit more there. And with those kinds of drills, as you were talking about earlier, and a lot of people have it's like this like, oh, rest digest road, or like fight or flight road, and it's like either or. But it's like, well, you gotta you gotta be moving in between, merging lanes every now and then. And with a drill like that, it's so great to see someone mixing, them together to just be more resilient, or like just like a little bit stronger. And they're not even lifting any weights. They're just literally standing, looking like a crazy person. And then they think it's hilarious because afterwards I'll, be like, well, go do it, go do it at the grocery store line, or, do it in your vehicle next to someone. It'll be, they'll give you a sweet look. But with that being said, it just kind of brings about a little bit more focus on the internal body, as opposed to kind of when previously when people would come in, it was a lot of an external approach to training. And with a lot of the MovMed drills, it's very internal. And I feel like people get a lot out of that. And then they can take what they learned from those drills, and put that into anything else. Doesn't matter what it is. And you can get so much out of whatever it is else you're doing, with just being able to have felt that in training.
So stress is stress. It doesn't matter how, where, and why. You're saying an elevated heart rate is an elevated heart rate. The thoughts that may create that, or the actions that may create that, are irrelevant, respective of your ability to integrate some degree of, in our case, MovMed exercise to bring back or come back to calm. And that may be up-regulating sympathetics or down-regulating them, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, you're saying that there's an overlap there. That's
Yeah, there's definitely an overlap there. But I think, as going back to what I had said, it was like what I feel like a lot of people need is just to be more resilient in a way that like they're not like it's more about being able to feel stronger without being so amped up, just having kind of that swagger about yourself, or just like a bit more of a confidence within you, to be like, like my, coming in and constantly having aches and pains and stuff. And you start to see that a lot of the drills, especially the ones that no equipment is needed, are some of the most beneficial drills, because people realized how much bigger they are, or how much more tone they can garner by just simply standing there and putting some effort into a position, or actually taking the time to communicate with an area of their body. And yeah, with the MovMed drills themselves, I find that they do create a lot of resilience in people, especially week to week, because you can just you just progress, whatever it is we were doing from the start, you can progress the drill into something that makes them so much stronger than they thought they would be. Like there was this one client I had who is, she's scared of heights, scared of bugs, is scared of having she had the fear of, literally, she's fearful of a weight being on her. And I was like, oh, this is great. Like we're going to be putting a weight on for sure. But she was always scared of everything. And, just slow exposure therapy towards, a lot of the stuff and principles we're doing. And, a lot of the boxes were just simply ticked. And once again, they're ticked is because we just slowly started making her more resilient, a little bit stronger, from just basic drills. And that is, in a nutshell, what I feel like MovMed was for me when I first started, and how I still see it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good place to wrap. Conquering fears, or exposing yourself to fears and not letting fear shrink you. So yeah, man, thanks for coming on, Evan. Sweet to chat about your fatherhood and development and your training and stuff. So yeah, Evan, you're doing the classes Wednesdays 10 a.m. So anyone wants to just put up $25 a month, you can train in a group class with Evan, and get some coaching, as well as our other classes and the recordings we have. Anything else you want to plug? You're out there in Ottawa, right, Evan?
I got no time, man. I don't plug anything. I feel bad because I should always post or do something, but just I got no time right now.
Okay, man. Well, thanks for making the time for us here. We'll let you get back to the rest of your night and some kid-free hours, hopefully.
Yeah, much appreciated, guys. Have a good night.
Good seeing you.
Good seeing you, mate. Bye.